During the ancient era in Israel, when the nation was under the leadership of judges, the people experienced a recurring pattern. They alternated between faithful obedience to God, falling into sin, enduring oppression by their adversaries, and pleading for rescue. The book of Judges describes this as a chaotic and unsettled time, characterized by constant instability and numerous hardships. As noted in Judges 6:1, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites. The oppression inflicted by the Midianites was particularly harsh and merciless. Like a devastating swarm of locusts, the Midianites swept over the land of Israel, leaving destruction in their wake by ravaging the crops and seizing livestock. The people of God, who had once thrived in abundance, were now forced to hide in caves and mountain strongholds, gripped by fear for their survival and daily provisions. Amid this turmoil, we encounter Gideon, a seemingly unremarkable young man who was in fact chosen for an extraordinary task. The scene is vividly set in Judges 6:11. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. Picture the moment. Gideon hunched over in a space designed for pressing wine, frantically working to preserve a small amount of wheat so his family could have enough to endure. A thick cloud of fear and uncertainty permeated the atmosphere, pressing down on everything. In this seemingly fragile moment, something extraordinary and unexpected took place. As recorded in Judges 6:12, the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon. He said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Mighty warrior. Gideon likely glanced around in confusion, convinced the angel must have been addressing someone else entirely. Gideon's reply clearly reveals his doubts and the frustration he was feeling. In Judges 6:13, we read, "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied, "but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." Gideon's reply resonates with the struggles and questions many of us grapple with when encountering hardships. Where can God be found when suffering surrounds us? Why do hardships and suffering occur even when God is said to be with us? Yet the angel of the Lord was not there to engage in theological discussions. He arrived with a clear and purposeful mission. Judges 6:14 carries on with the message. The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" Despite hearing this, Gideon remains unconvinced and begins to offer excuses. Gideon perceives himself as the most insignificant member of his family, which itself is the weakest within their entire tribe. How could someone like him be selected for such an extraordinary and daunting mission? Judges 6:15-16 reveals this exchange. "Pardon me, Lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family," the Lord answered. "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." God's promise is unmistakable and filled with authority. This promise relies not on Gideon's abilities, but entirely on God's presence and unmatched power. However, Gideon, still unsure, requests a sign as confirmation. Gideon prepares a special offering consisting of goat meat and unleavened bread. The angel of the Lord responds by performing a miraculous act. As recorded in Judges 6:21, with the tip of the staff that was in his hand, the angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread. Fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and the bread, and the angel of the Lord disappeared. In that instant, the overwhelming reality of God's divine presence struck Gideon profoundly. Judges 6:22-23 narrates, "When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, 'Alas, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face.' But the Lord said to him, 'Peace, do not be afraid, you are not going to die.'" This extraordinary calling was firmly established. Gideon, the most unlikely candidate, had been divinely selected for a mission that would alter the trajectory of Israel's history forever. The path of his transformation, from a terrified individual concealing himself in a winepress to a courageous leader of his people, was only in its infancy. Gideon constructed an altar in that very place and named it "The Lord is Peace." That location in Ophrah, once marked by fear and desperation, was transformed into a lasting monument to the life-changing meeting between an all-powerful God and a humble, ordinary man. Though God's call to Gideon was unmistakable, the young man continued to wrestle with his doubts and feelings of inadequacy. Even after erecting an altar and naming it "The Lord is Peace," Gideon still sought further confirmation before taking on the responsibility of leading Israel against the Midianites. The story proceeds in Judges 6:36-37. Gideon said to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece, and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you said." Gideon's plea demonstrates his ongoing doubts and need for reassurance. He longed for a visible, tangible sign that would unequivocally confirm God's will. This reflects a common human tendency to look for solid, physical proof, even when confronted with direct assurances from God. The events that followed were remarkable, as described in Judges 6:38. And that is what happened. Gideon rose early the next morning. He squeezed the fleece and wrung out the dew, a bowl full of water. Picture the moment. Gideon rising at dawn, his heart pounding as he moved toward the fleece. As he lifted it, the heavy weight of the water was undeniable. His hands shook with awe as he wrung the fleece, producing enough water to fill an entire bowl. The ground surrounding it was utterly dry, an unmistakable and miraculous sign. Yet the narrative continues beyond this point. Gideon, still wrestling with doubts, dares to make an even more audacious request. Judges 6:39-40 recounts, "Then Gideon said to God, 'Do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece, but this time make the fleece dry and let the ground be covered with dew.' That night God did so, only the fleece was dry. All the ground was covered with dew." This second trial entirely reversed the conditions of the first test. Gideon now requested the fleece to remain dry, while the surrounding ground became saturated with dew. Such a request contradicted natural laws, as fleece ordinarily absorbs moisture from the atmosphere. God's willingness to fulfill this second test reveals his immense patience and profound understanding of Gideon's wavering faith. This moment stands as a powerful testament to how God graciously accommodates human frailty, offering the reassurances needed to fulfill his purposes. These remarkable events carry deep spiritual significance. The fleece itself, made from sheep's wool, may symbolize the nation of Israel, often referred to as God's flock. During the first test, the fleece being wet amidst a dry landscape could symbolize God's special blessing upon his people in a spiritually barren world. Conversely, in the second test, the dry fleece surrounded by dewy ground might signify how God would use Israel to extend blessings to the surrounding nations. Beyond their symbolic meaning, these tests highlight Gideon's slow but steady transformation from a fearful man hiding in a winepress. Now Gideon engaged directly with God, wrestling with the terms of his emerging faith and leadership role. It's crucial to recognize that while God responded to Gideon's requests, relying on signs is not presented in Scripture as the highest expression of faith. Throughout the Bible, we are frequently called to place unwavering trust in God's word without seeking extraordinary signs as validation. Yet in this pivotal period of Israel's history, God graciously chose to bolster Gideon's faltering faith with visible and tangible confirmations. The events surrounding the fleece signify a crucial turning point in Gideon's story. Gideon's lingering doubts were dispelled, and his faith grew stronger. With newfound confidence, Gideon stood prepared to lead Israel against their oppressors. The man who once deemed himself the least in his household was on the verge of becoming one of Israel's most notable judges. The account of the fleece imparts several valuable lessons. First, it underscores God's extraordinary patience with our doubts and his readiness to provide the assurances we need to carry out his will. Second, it reveals that faith frequently matures incrementally through real, tangible encounters with God. And third, it affirms that when God assigns us a mission, he also provides the confidence and resources required to see it through. As the morning sun dried the dew, Gideon rose with renewed strength and purpose. His lingering insecurities dissipated like the evaporating dew, replaced by an unshakable resolve. The warrior God had envisioned from the very start was now coming into full view. Armed with divine confirmation, Gideon prepared for the next chapter of his journey. An army needed to be assembled, and a momentous battle was drawing near. The man who had tested God through the fleece was about to face a trial of his faith and courage in the furnace of battle. Strengthened by the miraculous signs of the fleece, Gideon stood prepared to lead Israel into battle against the Midianites. The divine call resonated within him, and the moment to act had finally arrived. The story moves to a pivotal juncture in Israel's history, where human reasoning was about to be upended by the wisdom of God. Judges 7:1 sets the stage. Jerubbaal, that is, Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose early and camped beside the spring of Harod. The camp of Midian was north of them, in the valley near Mount Moreh. Gideon, now bearing the name Jerubbaal, let Baal contend, had taken a stand against idolatry. Following his bold act of demolishing Baal's altar, Gideon had amassed a substantial army. Scripture provides insight into the sheer size of the force Gideon assembled. Judges 7:4 recounts, "This declaration indicates that the army was stationed on Mount Gilead, poised for the impending battle. The reaction of the soldiers to this announcement was nothing short of startling. As the verse continues, 22,000 soldiers departed, leaving only 10,000 behind. Picture the moment. Over 2/3 of Gideon's army walked away, reducing his force to just a third of its initial size. For any commander, watching 22,000 troops leave on the brink of a vital confrontation would be utterly disheartening. Yet God's plan was entirely different. Rather than mourning the departure of thousands of soldiers, God astonishes Gideon with an unexpected proclamation. Judges 7:4 recounts, "But the Lord said to Gideon, 'There are still too many men. Take them down to the water, and I will separate them for you. If I say this one shall go with you, he shall go. But if I say this one shall not go with you, he shall not go.'" This command defies conventional military strategy. The Midianites, along with their allies, represented an overwhelming and fearsome enemy. Judges 7:12 portrays the Midianites vividly. The Amalekites and all the other eastern peoples had settled in the valley. They were numerous as locusts. Their camels could no more be counted than the sand on the seashore. Confronted by such an immense foe, the logical approach would be to muster every available soldier. But God's strategy was entirely unconventional. Obediently, Gideon leads the remaining 10,000 men to the water as instructed. What follows is a unique divine selection process based on an unexpected criterion. Judges 7:5-7 recounts, "Gideon took the men down to the water, and the Lord told him, 'Separate those who lap the water with their tongues as a dog laps from those who kneel down to drink.' 300 men lapped with their hands to their mouths. All the rest knelt down to drink. The Lord said to Gideon with the 300 men that lapped, 'I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands. Let all the others go home.'" This unusual test reduced Gideon's army from 32,000 to a mere 300 men, a staggering decrease of over 99%. To grasp the magnitude of this reduction, consider a modern army of 100,000 being pared down to only 937 soldiers. From a human perspective, this would seem like sheer folly and a guarantee of military defeat. Yet, God's methods transcend human understanding, and his plans are beyond our comprehension. This dramatic downsizing served a clear purpose, as stated in Judges 7:2. "You have too many men for me to deliver Midian into their hands, in order that Israel may not boast against me that her own strength has saved her." God was imparting a profound lesson, not only to Gideon, but also to the nation of Israel and to all generations yet to come. Triumph would not be achieved through overwhelming numbers or superior tactics, but solely through God's omnipotent power. This principle resonates throughout history, culminating in the New Testament with Paul's words in 2 Corinthians 12:9. "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." At first glance, choosing the 300 men based on how they drank water might appear arbitrary, but it likely holds deeper significance. The men who lapped the water like dogs, staying upright and alert, might symbolize the most ready and vigilant warriors. They maintained their focus, refusing to lower their guard, even for the simple act of drinking water. Such alertness would prove vital in the impending battle. Additionally, the number 300 carries symbolic weight in biblical history. Abraham used 318 men to rescue Lot in Genesis 14. Similarly, Samson achieved victory over the Philistines with 300 men in Judges 15. Once again, God was showcasing his ability to achieve mighty works through a few faithful individuals. Envision the mixture of emotions sweeping through the Israelite camp that night. The 9,700 soldiers who returned home may have felt a combination of relief at avoiding the fight and shame for not being among the chosen, while the 300 who stayed behind were left with a profound sense of honor and trepidation. Those who remained likely grappled with a blend of pride in being selected and apprehension about the daunting challenge that lay ahead. For Gideon, this moment marked the ultimate trial of his recently bolstered faith. Gideon had previously sought signs from God using the fleece, and God had graciously responded. Now it was God who was calling on Gideon to demonstrate his trust by leading an incredibly small army against a massive enemy force. The drastic downsizing of Gideon's army imparts timeless lessons about the essence of faith, trust in God, and the boundless power of divine intervention. It serves as a reminder that God requires neither vast numbers nor extensive resources to fulfill his sovereign plans. More often than not, God selects the small, the weak, and the seemingly unlikely to manifest his power and ensure that all the glory is directed to him. This account challenges us to place our trust in God, even when the situation appears utterly insurmountable. How often do we find ourselves feeling unqualified or unequipped for the missions that God calls us to undertake? The story of Gideon reassures us that it is in those very moments of inadequacy that God's power can shine the brightest. As the 300 chosen men readied themselves for battle, sharpening their weapons and securing their armor, a palpable sense of anticipation filled the camp. They were keenly aware that they stood on the brink of witnessing something miraculous. The God who had deliberately reduced their numbers undoubtedly had a grand plan for their triumph. As night descended over the Israelite camp, the air grew tense with expectation. In the valley below, the flickering campfires of the vast Midianite army served as a stark reminder to Gideon and his men of the daunting challenge they faced. Yet, with God's intervention, the impossible was on the verge of becoming a reality. One of Israel's most pivotal battles was about to unfold. Not with the thunderous march of thousands, but through the steadfast faith of just 300 men. With just 300 soldiers pitted against an enemy as numerous as a swarm of locusts, Gideon faced what seemed to be an utterly hopeless situation. Yet in his boundless wisdom, God had devised a remarkable strategy to secure victory for Israel. The night leading up to the battle was a critical turning point. Acknowledging Gideon's understandable fear, God extended a unique opportunity to bolster his confidence and faith. Judges 7:9-11 records. That night the Lord said to Gideon, "Get up and go down to the camp, for I'm giving it into your hands. If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Pur and listen to what they are saying. Afterwards, you will be encouraged to attack the camp." This divine directive illustrates God's deep awareness of human vulnerabilities and his readiness to fortify his servants when they need it most. In obedience, Gideon ventured into the enemy's camp with his servant Purah by his side. What unfolded next was a remarkable demonstration of divine providence. Judges 7:13-14 paints the scene vividly. Gideon arrived just as a man was telling his friend, "About a dream I had a dream," he was saying. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. His friend responded, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands." This dream, along with its vivid interpretation, was precisely the confirmation Gideon needed to restore his confidence and resolve. The humble barley loaf, a staple food for the poorer Israelites, symbolized Gideon's seemingly insignificant yet divinely chosen army. The collapsing tent was a clear representation of the impending downfall of the Midianites at Gideon's hands. Through this dream, God revealed to Gideon that even his enemies were subconsciously acknowledging the divine power working on his behalf. Empowered by this encounter, Gideon returned to his camp, filled with renewed determination to lead his small band of warriors. Judges 7:15 recounts, "When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped God. He returned to the camp of Israel and called out, 'Get up! The Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands.'" Bolstered by a strengthened faith, Gideon prepared to carry out the unconventional strategy God had revealed. The plan was nothing short of extraordinary. Judges 7:16 describes it in detail, dividing the 300 men into 3 companies. He placed trumpets and empty jars in the hands of all of them, with torches inside. Picture the dramatic moment. 300 men, each armed not with swords or shields, but with trumpets clutched in one hand and jars concealing torches in the other. Such an unusual choice of equipment was far from the typical arsenal expected of warriors preparing to confront a significantly larger and more formidable enemy force. Gideon gave his warriors precise instructions, as recounted in Judges 7:17-18. "Watch me," he commanded them, "and follow my lead." He continued, "When I reach the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I and those with me blow our trumpets, you too will blow yours from every side of the camp and shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" This guidance was clear and strategic, ensuring perfect coordination for their bold plan. Gideon's strategy, while seemingly straightforward, was ingenious in its psychological impact. The goal was to deceive the enemy into believing they were under attack by a massive army. By exploiting the cover of darkness and the element of surprise, the plan was designed to sow confusion and terror among the Midianites. The dramatic execution of the plan is described in Judges 7:19-20. Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just after they had changed the guard. At that moment, they unleashed their assault, blowing their trumpets and smashing the jars they carried. The 3 companies blew the trumpets and smashed the jars. Grasping the torches in their left hands and holding in their right hands the trumpets they were to blow, they shouted a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. The impact of this divine strategy was both swift and overwhelming. Judges 7:21-22 recounts, "Every man remained stationed at his position around the camp, and all the Midianites began to run, crying out as they fled. When the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their swords. The army fled to Beth Shittah, towards Zarira as far as the border of Abel-Meholah near Tabbath. The confusion in the Midianite camp was complete and overwhelming. The piercing blasts of 300 trumpets shattered the night silence, accompanied by the dazzling glow of 300 torches suddenly cutting through the darkness. The cries of, "For the Lord and for Gideon," reverberated from every direction, amplifying the fear and making it seem as though a colossal army had surrounded them. In their blind panic, the Midianites turned on each other, unable to differentiate between allies and enemies in the pitch-black chaos, further deepening their disarray and ensuring their downfall. This remarkable divine strategy reveals several profound and essential truths. To begin with, it clearly demonstrates how God frequently employs unconventional means to accomplish his divine purposes. Remarkably, the tools of triumph in this battle were not traditional weapons like swords or spears, but instead, they were unexpected items: trumpets, jars, and torches. Secondly, this account emphasizes the crucial value of obedience in fulfilling God's plans. Gideon and his men adhered meticulously to God's directions, even when those instructions appeared unusual or defied conventional logic. Their unwavering faithfulness was met with an extraordinary and miraculous victory. Furthermore, it serves as a vivid illustration of the incredible power that faith in action can wield. The 300 men were required to place their trust in the success of the plan, courageously putting themselves in peril by smashing their jars and making their positions visible with the torches. Lastly, it shows that when God takes charge, even the smallest and seemingly weakest forces can conquer the most formidable challenges. This victory was not achieved through Israel's might or military power, but rather through the divine strength of God operating through his faithful and obedient servants. As the Midianites scattered in panic, Gideon and his men stayed steadfastly in their positions, observing the astonishing evidence of divine intervention. Although the battle itself was won, the pursuit of the retreating enemies had only just begun. The Israelite forces, who had been observing from afar, would now enter the fray to assist in the chase, ensuring the triumph that God had so marvelously set into motion was fully realized. Strengthened by his complete trust in God's power, Gideon led a determined and unyielding pursuit of the fleeing adversaries. This phase of the campaign would not only showcase Gideon's unwavering resolve, but also expose the internal struggles and divisions that Israel faced, even in the midst of success. Judges 7:23-24 gives us insight into how this relentless pursuit began. The Israelites from the tribes of Naphtali, Asher, and all of Manasseh were summoned, and they joined in the chase after the Midianites. Gideon dispatched messengers to the hill country of Ephraim with this command: "Come down and attack the Midianites. Take control of the waters of the Jordan as far as Beth-barah to block their escape route." This summons highlights Gideon's skillful and strategic leadership during the campaign. Gideon not only relentlessly pursued the enemy, but also effectively organized reinforcements to intercept and block the Midianites' path of retreat. The response from the Ephraimites was swift, as evidenced in the continuation of Judges 7:24. All the men of Ephraim were summoned, and they successfully secured the waters of the Jordan up to Beth-barah. This strategic move by Gideon turned out to be highly effective. Judges 7:25 recounts, they also captured 2 Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb and Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. They pursued the Midianites and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was on the other side of the Jordan. The capture and subsequent execution of the Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb, dealt a substantial and demoralizing blow to the enemy forces. Nevertheless, this victory also revealed underlying internal discord and tensions among Israel's tribes. Judges 8:1 provides insight into how this conflict began. The men of Ephraim confronted Gideon with accusations saying, "Why did you treat us this way? Why didn't you involve us when you set out to fight the Midianites?" They rebuked him with great intensity. This response from the Ephraimites reveals their sense of tribal pride and their strong desire for recognition, which frequently posed a challenge to Israel's unity. Although they had made a vital contribution by capturing the Midianite leaders, they still felt excluded from the honor of the initial victory. Gideon's reply showcases his tactful diplomacy and wisdom in handling conflicts. Judges 8:2-3 states, "But he answered them, 'What have I accomplished compared to you? Aren't the gleanings of Ephraim better than the full grape harvest of Abuzer? God gave Oreb and Zeb, the Midianite leaders, into your hands. What was I able to do compared to you?' At this, their resentment against him subsided. By responding in such a wise and measured manner, Gideon succeeded in calming the Ephraimites. He honored their efforts while modestly minimizing his own accomplishments. Gideon's capacity to navigate internal disputes proved essential for preserving Israel's cohesion, both during and after the campaign. While resolving these tensions, Gideon and his men pressed on with their pursuit of the Midianite kings. Judges 8:4-5 offers a vivid glimpse into the relentless nature of this chase. Gideon and his 300 men, exhausted yet still pursuing the enemy, came to the Jordan and crossed it. He said to the men of Succoth, "Give some bread to my troops. They are worn out, and I'm still pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian." Gideon's plea underscores the unwavering determination of his small band of warriors and the immense challenges they endured during their mission. Despite being utterly fatigued, they pressed on with the chase, displaying extraordinary commitment to their divine calling. The reaction from the men of Succoth, however, was unexpectedly dismissive and uncooperative. As recorded in Judges 8:6, the officials of Succoth retorted, "Are Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hands that we should give bread to your troops?" This refusal not only highlighted a lack of unity and cooperation, but also revealed a striking absence of faith in Gideon's capacity to accomplish the task at hand. Gideon's reply was both severe and prophetic in nature. Judges 8:7 tells us the following: "Then Gideon said, 'Very well, When the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hands, I will tear your flesh with desert thorns and briars." Gideon encountered a similar response when he approached the people of Penuel, as documented in Judges 8:8-9. From there, he went up to Penuel and made the same request. But they answered as the men of Succoth had. So he said to the men of Penuel, "When I return victorious, I will tear down this tower." These exchanges shed light on the intricate political and social challenges that Gideon was forced to confront while carrying out his military campaign. Not everyone in Israel stood in solidarity with his mission. In fact, certain groups displayed outright hostility or deep-seated skepticism. Despite facing these discouraging setbacks, Gideon and his men pressed on with unwavering determination in their pursuit. The results of this relentless pursuit are outlined in Judges 8:10-12. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Carco with a force of about 15,000 men. All that remained of the armies of the eastern peoples, 120,000 swordsmen, had fallen. Gideon made a surprise attack against the army by the route of the nomads east of Nobah and Yogbihar, and he routed the army. Zebah and Zalmunna, the two Midianite kings, fled, but he pursued them and captured them, routing the entire army. Capturing these two Midianite kings effectively brought the Midianite threat to an end. However, Gideon still had unresolved matters to address with those who had refused to assist him in his efforts. Judges 8:13-17 details how Gideon carried out the promises he had made to the people of Succoth and Penuel. Gideon, son of Joash, returned from the battle by the pass of Heres. He captured a young man of Succoth and interrogated him, and the young man wrote down for him the names of the 77 authorities of Succoth, the leaders of the city. Then Gideon went to the men of Succoth and said, "Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, concerning whom you taunted me, saying, 'Have you already captured Zebah and Zalmunna? Why should we give bread to your weary men?'" So he took the leaders of the city and punished them with the thorns and briars of the wilderness. He also tore down the tower of Penuel and killed the men of the city. These actions by Gideon, though they might appear harsh when viewed from a modern perspective, illustrate his commitment to keeping his word and solidifying his role as the leader of Israel. They also stand as a stark warning about the consequences of failing to show unity and provide support during moments of national peril. Finally, Gideon confronted the Midianite kings he had captured during the campaign. Judges 8:18-21 narrates this final dramatic encounter. Then he asked Zebah and Zalmunna, "What kind of men were those whom you killed at Tabor?" "Men like you," they answered, "each one with the bearing of a prince." Gideon replied, "Those men were my brothers, the sons of my mother. As surely as the Lord lives, if you had spared them, I would not kill you," he said to Jether, his oldest son. "Draw your sword and kill them." But Jether did not draw his sword because he was afraid. Being still a boy, Zebah and Zalmunna said, "Get up yourself and kill us, for as the man is, so is his strength." So Gideon arose and killed them, and he took the ornaments off the necks of their camels. This climactic episode of the pursuit reveals several important aspects of Gideon's personality and leadership. His determination to exact vengeance for his brothers showcases his deep commitment to justice and his unwavering loyalty to his family. The reluctance of his young son Jether, coupled with Gideon's decisive action, further underscores his strength and resolve as a leader. The deaths of Zebah and Zalmunna brought Gideon's arduous campaign against the Midianites to a definitive conclusion. Israel was finally liberated from the oppressive control of the Midianites, and Gideon rose to prominence as a strong and highly respected leader among his people. However, the effects of this victory, along with the choices Gideon made in its aftermath, would leave a significant and enduring mark on Israel's history, as we shall uncover in the next phase of his life. Following his decisive triumph over the Midianites, Gideon found himself elevated to a position of immense respect and influence within the nation of Israel. Nevertheless, Gideon's legacy would become a complex narrative of both remarkable triumphs and heartbreaking tragedies, encompassing acts of faithfulness as well as moments of failure. The people, deeply impressed by Gideon's leadership and success, presented him with an unexpected and notable proposal. As stated in Judges 8:22, the Israelites approached Gideon and said, Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian." This proposal revealed the people's growing desire for strong, centralized leadership, a sentiment that foreshadowed the establishment of Israel's monarchy in the future. Gideon's response, however, reflected his deep awareness of who the true king of Israel was meant to be. Judges 8:23 records his reply as follows: "But Gideon told them, 'I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you.'" Gideon's statement was a profound testament to his faith and a clear acknowledgement of God's rightful position as the ultimate leader of Israel. He fully understood that his victory had not come through his own strength or abilities, but rather through the mighty power of God. Nevertheless, the actions Gideon took in the aftermath of this event began to reveal the complicated and multifaceted nature of his character. Judges 8:24-27 provides an account of an intriguing and significant event. He went on to say, "I do have one request of you. Give me each of you an earring from your share of the plunder." "It was the custom of the Ishmaelites to wear gold earring," they answered. "We'll be glad to give them." So they spread out a garment, and each man threw a ring from his plunder into it. The weight of the gold earrings he asked for came to about 25 pounds, not counting the ornamental pendants, the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, or the chains that were on the camels' necks. Gideon made the gold into an ephod, which he placed in his hometown Ophrah. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. This event uncovers a notable weakness in Gideon's judgment and discernment. Although Gideon may not have intended to establish an idolatrous cult, his actions ultimately caused the people to engage in a misguided and improper form of worship. The ephod, a priestly garment that he had fashioned, became an object of undue reverence and false worship, drawing the people away from the true worship of God. Despite this serious misstep, Gideon's leadership had an immediate positive effect on Israel, as stated in Judges 8:28. Thus, Midian was subdued before the Israelites and did not raise its head again. During Gideon's lifetime, the land had peace for 40 years. These 4 decades of peace served as a testament to the strength of Gideon's leadership and to the blessings of God upon Israel when the nation followed his ways. However, the story also indicates that the foundation for future problems was quietly being laid during this time. Judges 8:30-31 offers insight into Gideon's personal life and family situation. Gideon had 70 sons born to him, for he had many wives. His concubine, who lived in Shechem, also bore him a son, whom he named Abimelech. This portrayal of Gideon's family life, especially the reference to his numerous wives and a concubine, implies that he may have embraced practices more characteristic of the kings of surrounding nations than those expected of a divinely appointed leader of Israel. The deliberate mention of Abimelech is particularly noteworthy, as he would later become a key figure in one of the more tragic chapters of Israel's history. Judges 8:32 provides a concise summary of Gideon's final years in passing. Gideon, son of Joash, died at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Tragically, following Gideon's death, the people of Israel swiftly abandoned the path of righteousness. Judges 8:33-35 recounts the events that unfolded after Gideon's passing. No sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals. They set up Baal-berith as their god and did not remember the Lord their God who had rescued them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. They also failed to show loyalty to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, for all the good things he had done for them. This relapse into idolatry and the absence of gratitude toward Gideon's family vividly illustrates the recurring pattern of Israel's history during the era of the Judges. Times of faithfulness and divine blessing were frequently succeeded by periods of spiritual backsliding and national unrest. The account of Gideon stands as a profound and inspiring testament to how God can work through the most unexpected and seemingly unqualified individuals to accomplish his divine purposes. From the moment God called him, despite his status as the least significant member of his family, to his rise as a courageous and influential leader of Israel, Gideon's story demonstrates that faith and obedience have the power to triumph over even the deepest fears and insecurities. The life of Gideon serves as a challenge and encouragement for us to put our trust in God, even when the odds are overwhelmingly against us and the situation seems utterly hopeless. It reminds us of a vital truth. God is able to achieve incredible things with even the smallest resources when we wholeheartedly place our trust in Him and His plans. As we take time to reflect on this powerful story, we should ask ourselves, in what areas of our lives might God be urging us to step out and take bold action in faith? What seemingly insurmountable armies of challenges or difficulties are we currently facing in our own lives? How can we, following Gideon's example, take the next step forward in obedience, relying not on our personal abilities or strength, but fully trusting in the boundless power of God? The story of Gideon continues to hold deep relevance for us today, reminding us that God is still actively working to transform ordinary, everyday people into extraordinary instruments to accomplish His will and His purposes. May we also respond to God's call, as Gideon did, with unwavering faith and sincere obedience, fully prepared to be used by Him in ways that are far beyond anything we could have ever envisioned or imagined for ourselves. If this story has spoken to your heart and inspired you, and if you are eager to explore more about the remarkable heroes of faith in the Bible, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel and turn on your notifications so you don't miss anything. Together, we can embark on a journey to dive into the profound and timeless lessons that Scripture offers and discover how we can apply these truths and teachings to enrich and guide our everyday lives.